All right, all right. Good afternoon, and welcome to Working Solutions. And thank you so much for joining the Game Changer conversation today. And we're talking about moving the needle for BIPOC-owned food brands with our wonderful guest, Nona Lim. To let you know, the Game Changer is a series of thoughtful conversations that highlight impact-driven unsung heroes, change makers, entrepreneurs, and organizations that are moving the needle forward for our most vulnerable communities. Before we get into our conversation, I'd like to share a little bit about Working Solutions. I don't want to assume everybody on the call today knows about our organization. Briefly, Working Solutions is a nonprofit community development financial institution, other known as a CDFI. And we're dedicated to providing affordable capital and free business consulting to diverse entrepreneurs in California. We are the leading micro lender, not because of how much money we loan, but because we believe it is our mantra. We're the first to believe in small business. Just to give you an added overview, let me tell you a little bit more about the organization I am so proud to be a part of. And so we offer small business funding. And our loans start at $5,000 and we max at $100,000. As I mentioned, we're a mission-driven nonprofit. We specialize in microloans to early phase and startups. We offer business consulting for the full term of the loan up to 5 years. And I got to tell you, even when that loan is satisfied, we still have our clients coming back to us, and we are here for them. And I want you to know we started out with 9 counties, then 19, and we're happy to be able to express that we're reaching beyond those 19 counties in California. And again, we are a mission-driven nonprofit CDFI, and we are certified by the U.S. Department of the Treasury. So you can definitely trust in us. All-time impact. We have been able to serve so many entrepreneurs with 51 million in total of loans and grants. Our TA hours, 50,000 plus. The businesses that we have funded, over 28,000, 2,800, I'm sorry, and 29,000 is our average loan amount with a repayment rate of 95%. That's not bad at all. So our priority areas, our niche focus is on early stage and startup businesses, and our population areas, low income, women entrepreneurs, and entrepreneurs of color. And to let you know, these are our service areas, and as of this date, our service areas, and we'll give you more information on that in the coming weeks. We're real proud to be a growing organization, and we're really happy to be able to serve more entrepreneurs. And so our product offering is capital and consulting. So our loan product is as such. We start at 5,000, we max at 100,000. We have 2 loan terms. Our interest rates are fixed, and there is an application fee and a closing cost on the loan amount itself, as well as a personal guarantee. But there are no minimum credit scores, no minimum business revenue, no collateral needed, and no prepayment penalties. So our consulting, there's pre-loan consulting and financial education, and there's post-loan consulting. And this is what I really love about our organization. We're just not going to send or fund your account, but we're going to hold your hand and we're going to walk with you, because we want to make sure that our entrepreneurs that we serve are successful. And then there's consulting. It focuses on money management and marketing. I want to tell you a little bit about the vegan hood chefs. They were motivated by a lack of access to healthy foods, and I have tasted their foods. I just want to tell you, great, great chefs. This organization or this business is run by chefs Renisha Johnson and Rahima Calloway. They co-founded the Vegan Hood Chefs. We provided them with capital and consulting, and today they regularly serve up healthy foods at events around the Bay Area. Thank you. Next slide. And then there's Lily and Alan Gomez. They opened up the El Tiny Cafe, at the beginning of 2020, to realize their entrepreneurial dreams, particularly when COVID hit. They reached out to Working Solutions, and we were able to provide them funding. And Alan and Lily were matched with Spanish-speaking consultants who helped them identify the correct cost of sales and streamline their operations to improve their profitability. Again, I want to just hone in. Working Solutions is not simply someone who's going to fund our entrepreneurs, but we are here to serve them. We are here to handhold. We are here to support. And so we get to know our clients, and we're really proud of that. And so if you're interested in funding through Working Solutions, well, where do you start? You're going to start with a loan inquiry form. And then if everything goes well, you're going to move to the full application. And then you're going to compile and submit other documents. And once we receive that information, we're going to review and make a decision. And if everything is great, we're going to go to funding. Thank you so much. If you want to know more about us, you can reach us at workingsolutions.org. There's our email and our phone number. Thank you so much, Crystal, for that. Really appreciate it. So now I want to tell you a little bit about our moderator, because we're getting ready, pardon me, to talk a little bit about serving BIPOC food brands. And I want to tell you a little bit about Titi Ikile. I happen to think the world of her, and I'm sure you will too. Titi Ikile serves as the Chief Program Officer for Working Solutions CDFI. She holds a master's certificate in business analysis from Villanova University and a BS in finance and entrepreneurship from the University of Southern California. And she is a certified economic development finance professional. TT has worked in the area of small business lending and business coaching for over 10 years. Prior to joining Working Solutions, she worked for Citibank, JP Morgan Chase, the Small Business Development Center, and ran her own consulting firm. In her prior positions, she was responsible for managing and growing multi-million-dollar clientele portfolios while overseeing the client's lending and deposit needs. In addition to her diverse background in lending and business coaching, she certainly brings a wealth of experience and passion in financial analysis, sales and marketing, and business development. Everyone, I want to thank you for my time. Welcome, TT, who is going to introduce our special guest. Please enjoy the remainder of this webinar.
Thank you so much, Anita. Really appreciate the introduction. But really, honestly, I'm quite excited for this conversation with Nona. And so before we get started, I want to kind of just give you guys a short glimpse of who she is by reading her bio. So please listen so you can kind of appreciate who we have with us today. So Nona Lim was raised in Singapore, a melting pot of Asian cultures, full of outdoor markets and street foods, vendors where traditions were preserved and communities were forged amidst exuberant fusion of cultures. Captivated by the busy cooks and delicious aromas and flavors at the hawker center near her home, she saw how good to how food could be a universal way to connect cultures. I'm already kind of sensing that, all that visuals already. Nona left Singapore for a business consulting job in London and eventually made the leap to Oakland, California, where she followed her passion and began fencing competitively. As an athlete, she performed and felt best that when she fueled her body with clean foods, whole foods as a result. She began to study holistic nutrition, eventually became a certified nutrition consultant, and then finding limited options in 2014, she launched her eponymous brand, which we know as Nona Lim Foods, crafting clean versions of the recipes from the favorite dishes of her youth that didn't include MSG, no artificial ingredients, no preservatives. And Nona Lim products are still infused with her early Singapore childhood flavors and memories. And the brand celebrates difference and diversity, blending tradition and convenience to create delicious comfort food that is simply prepared and, most importantly, ready to be sipped or slurped together. Nona is also active in both local community and the food industry. She was the president of the San Francisco Professional Food Society and is currently the vice chair of the Specialty Food Association. Please join me and welcome Nona Lim today. Um, so we're excited to be here. Thank you for joining us, Nona.
Thank you so
So
much for having me.
you're welcome. You're welcome. Well, we already just reading your bio. It just to me, you embody transformation, growth, cultural preservation, and just everything about you kind of speaks to that embodiment. So of course, your name is Nona Lim. You have Nona Lim Foods. But before we jump into the brand itself, tell us more about Nona Lim, the person. Can you share your own childhood memories, where you draw your inspiration of who you are today? Thank you.
Absolutely. As you read earlier, I grew up in Singapore. So we grew up in a very small public housing apartment, and next to it was this big hawker center. In fact, I think it's one of the hawker centers that was featured in the Crazy Rich Asians, if you watched that movie. Right. And so, I would go there frequently as a young child to buy food, right? And then you have hundreds of hawkers or almost equivalent. They're kind of like the modern version of street vendors. They'll be cooking just one dish, whether it is flipping a roti prata, which is like an Indian dish, or getting that, big wok where they're doing a stir frying noodles. It's something that I really grew up with, and I would stare intently to see how they're doing it. And so I've always had a passion for food. And then not far from there would be a wet market. Literally, it's called a wet market because the grounds are very wet, right? You have like fresh fish, you have vegetables, you literally even have live chickens. And so my dad would drag me, I think it must have been 6 years old, at 6 in the morning to the wet market. I remember not liking it when I woke up because it was too early in the morning. But then when I was there, it was actually really it was a good memory afterwards, right? Like, oh, seeing how my father would pick, choosing different fresh fish, so and so forth. So I've always had that connection to food growing up.
Wow, that is incredible. The stories what you can share about just walking through the street. That's one of the, I think, the rich heritage that we have. Of course, this month is Asian American and Pacific Islander Month and Heritage Month, and we're just thrilled that you're able to bring that history and that memory, your cultural memories, even with us today to share that, and your food and your products exudes that, embodies that. So thank you for kind of taking us on that journey with you. So, I mean, you are kind of, you're bringing that memory of who you are and your culture into this space and into the work. So tell us, I mean, as we kind of looked at this journey of entrepreneurship, it's not, from your bio, it's not a linear process that you came into this. Tell us more about the Nona Lim, the brand. How
Sure.
did you get started? Tell us how you got started and the inspiration behind it.
Yeah, so Nona Lim, the brand itself was actually started in 2014. And it is a Asian CPG brand, with kind of fresh noodles and basically lots of different street food and comfort food, but done much healthier, better for you, and in a way that's much more accessible and convenient. But the journey, the entrepreneurial journey started before that. So I first moved to the US from London, and I decided to leave my kind of consulting background behind to go into food. And I'm sure, there are probably many in the audience who have done something similar when they're starting a business that they never didn't really have a background in, right? So I did that. And the first iteration of the business was actually kind of a meal kit delivery business, a little bit too ahead of its time. Back then, before HelloFresh and Blue Apron and all those businesses started, I was doing that while being a competitive fencer. And so, and so what I discovered was that suddenly, as a competitive fencer, especially with a lot of competitors who were a lot younger than me, right? While I could keep up with them on the strip, it definitely takes a toll on the body to recover, right? And having clean food, having healthy food is definitely something that helps me perform better. But I really back then, there isn't anything that's more kind of a Asian flavored, right? Because with Asian food, you either have at that point in time like the products that are full of MSG, etc., and then you have some brands on the other side of the spectrum that are clean label, but they're not really very authentic tasting, right? From where I'm coming from. And so what I did was I took the business idea and morphed it a few times, right? First it was meal kit, and then I found that it was difficult to scale that. The unit economics didn't quite work. And then I decided to take some of the soups, which were snacks on the program that I was doing with the meal kit delivery, and try to launch them into retail. In fact, the Working Solutions loan was the very first loan that allowed me to test kind of the pivot of the business from kind of a online platform to going into retail.
Wow, that is amazing. I do remember when you came to us with that loan, and I'm so glad that we were kind of part of that journey. But you gave like a big broad stroke of just your journey. But I know it wasn't a linear step. I know you had a lot of roadblocks. First, we'll talk about your leap from consulting into starting this. What kind of self-conversation did you have to have with yourself? When did you know it was the right time to leave your safe haven job and jump into this business?
For me, it was almost kind of forced upon me, right? Because my husband wanted to move from London to the US. And so, I was moving with him, and I was thinking, well, I could try and find, a job in the Bay Area in tech, because I moved from business consulting to tech consulting. And who knows, maybe that would have been a much more profitable outcome. Who knows, right? But it wasn't really my passion. And so I was thinking to myself, I'll just give it a year or two. And do it really cheaply and try it out and test it out, right? So it started off as an experiment. And then it was definitely not easy, right? So here I am being new to the country, being new to the industry, trying to figure out what to do. And I think early on, honestly, there are a lot of free resources available that have been very helpful. Like I looked into SBA straight away. SBA had all that checklist of what do you need to do to start a business, right? Like how do you do a business registration? How do you do all those really basic things that you actually have to get done to be compliant with all the regulation. I leaned into SBDC. They had mentorship program, that I free mentorship program that I signed up for. There was a Renaissance Center. They had some like webinars about fundraising, capital, and I think that's how I got to learn more about working solutions. So I really leaned in and just researched on what was available, or even San Francisco Professional Food Society, right? So I think there was definitely a lot of just reaching out and looking for resources that will help me, just help me learn. There's
Yeah.
definitely a steep learning curve, but it definitely wasn't easy. A lot of it is just you have to, you have to find things, or like, I think back then, gosh, that's pre-Zoom, right? Pre-social media, pre-everything. So you're not going to get anything virtual. And so it was a lot of, a lot more work than I think it is today.
Thank you. Thank you so much for, kind of sharing how you made that leap, kind of life turn, family changes, moved you into this set of like making a decision And even for you, I think it's comforting to our audience to know that even coming from a consulting background, you still had to do a lot of work, a lot of learning, a lot of research to get into even into a comfort zone to make this make this leap. And the resources around, the free resources, were so valuable for you. That is that's so critical. Thank you for sharing that. So, I mean, you made this leap. Can you share some of the obstacles that you faced creating a brand, the sourcing of inventory, the marketing? What are some things that you kind of felt like you had to kind of learn, and how did you kind of learn through that? And with just building a brand that is recognized now.
You know, definitely, I think that the advantage that I had then is just time, right? I wasn't and sometimes, you know, it's one of those things which is, you know, how could you do it on the side? Could you do it learning? And so when you're learning on the side, it costs a lot less money, but it takes longer. So I literally started with $5,000, right? Originally with my meal kit idea. I think I went on Craigslist and found that, oh, they had a timeshare kitchen out in Hunters Point for like $12 an hour per person, right? But before that, literally, I cooked at home. I was like, okay, I'm going to find, 10 couple friends, have them sign up for, a month's worth of meal kits where I will cook for them. I was prepping and doing stuff, right? As a test, and then delivering stuff to them and driving, seeing how it would be, and then doing focus group and saying what did they like, not like about it, and started off that way. So I started off really, really cheaply, and I started off, so that's challenging, right? When you start off so cheaply and you bootstrap it, you can learn a lot, but it does take longer, right? But then that's how I figured it out. And after having done the meal kit delivery business for a number of years, by the time I wanted to pivot into retail, thankfully I already was sharing kind of a kitchen space with another brand. And actually, once you have to make meal kits, is a lot more complicated when it comes to the production. There are a lot more recipes. Soups, in contrast, was a lot easier to make. And so then, I could make the soups, I could do, because we're making small batches, we're making it ourselves. So we did not have the challenges that you would face with a co-packer, with a contract manufacturer, where the minimums are really, really high, right? But still, it started off with a lot of experiments. Certainly, there are ways to shortcut it, but I remember that when I first launched the soup pouches, I went on Amazon and bought, it was almost like a chemistry lab where they have a little metal stand for $35, a little plastic funnel that you get that's actually for adding oil into your car. Of course, we make sure that it's clean, right? And then we're like a hand sealer from Amazon for like $90, right? And we'll fill the soup up by hand, and then clip on a little label, right? So absolutely not scalable, not profitable, but it was a concept. It allowed us to literally test. And so I would say that, I think a lot of the challenges can be figured out, but you have to really get your hands dirty, and you have to do it as scrappy as you can so you can figure out what works and what doesn't work.
Wow, I love the stories of just how everything was just made by hand, and the different resources that you were using at home, the home kitchen. You became a food chemist, and just to get to, to slowly kind of build from meal kit to like packaged foods. That's in itself, it's kind of like, you were learning and taking it step by step. Share some of those, and I'm still leaning on this because I think a lot of times, because we're going to talk about just the successes and how you're doing now. But before we get into that, share some of your failing forward stories that propelled you, continue to propel you forward. These are things that you, like big mistakes that you made, that you eventually lean into, and now you can look back. Because
Oh,
I
yeah.
think
There are so many, right? So, because I started doing a number of years with the meal kit delivery, detox program, and all that, right? And I was doing that at the same time while I was still fencing competitively. And in 2012, I almost made the London Olympics representing Singapore. So I missed it by a point. I was like, screw it, I'm going to have a baby instead, give up competitive fencing. And then I took a hard look at the business. At that time, the online meal kit program, it was probably, it was a big chunk of the business. By then, we had a couple of, a few $1 million of revenues there. But and it was very trendy, right? By 2010, 2012, you have hundreds of meal kit delivery businesses then. They've all raised a lot of money. And I was like, I've done the math though, like the customer acquisition is tough. Again, 2010, 2012, you don't have Facebook, you don't have social media boosted ads. And how do you reach consumers, right? So reaching consumers and finding consumers was really, really, really difficult. Again, I was a little bit too ahead of my time. And the packaging cost was really high. And so that was when, that's why I felt that, I wanted to pivot and go into retail. Right, so I did retail, and thankfully the meal kit delivery side of the business could support the retail business, which was very, very small and very nascent. But then I had to decide, we had to do a whole rebranding because Nona Lim, the brand, only existed from 2014. Right, before that it was called Cook San Francisco, but the designer had a tagline, real, simple, delicious. The design package, oh, so many mistakes in packaging design, right? Packaging design said real, simple, delicious. Nobody knew that Cook SF was the brand, and then be like, oh, is it real simple? What is it, right? So you get all those mistakes where you then have to do a whole rebranding, or then, eventually I decided to go all in on retail and shut down meal kit delivery, even though it was way bigger than the retail business. So there were so many hard choices. And there continues to be, a lot of hard choices along the way, but that was certainly one, right? Which it's kind of like a difficult choice, but eventually the right choice. Other decisions that didn't go so well would be, we would launch products that taste fantastic. Like we had this fresh noodle bowl. We did this collaboration with Whole Foods where they even had a whole noodle bar in the in one of their newest stores in the East Bay, and it was a fantastic product, but they eventually shut it down because they couldn't get labor to create the recipes correctly to even do it well, right? So then they just switch it into like a sandwich and a pizza thing, right? So, so you kind of learn afterwards, right? So in fact, all the things that I learned through my innovation is that actually you can't be too innovative, right? Because that was my biggest problem, honestly, coming from tech. In tech, you have an MVP, minimum viable product, and then you just keep innovating, iterating. You cannot do that in food because food moves so slowly with the reviews and resets. It takes a lot, it's so expensive to fix it. It's easy to fix something on the website, but you have to fix packaging and fix things like that, in finished goods and all that. So expensive. And you cannot innovate more than one or two things, right? Before that, I'll be like, oh, I'm going to come up with brand new packaging that nobody has done. I'm going to have fantastic flavors, right? I will create a lot of innovative ideas, but sometimes that might be 2 years too early or 3 years too early. And so that's probably my biggest failing forward lesson, which is even though I have great ideas in the last 4 years, I actually held back on a lot of those ideas because you have to wait for the right timing in food, right? And wait for the trend to show up because as an individual brand, I cannot create a trend, right? I think that's probably the biggest lesson that I've learned, and it's an expensive lesson, but I've managed to hang on, through the years so that, it's great that now the timing is right. And I can, really enjoy kind of all the trends and the momentum that comes from the trends.
Wow, such great gems that you're sharing. It takes the power of the collective to move trends forward. Like individually, you can't do it. So you got to work together, and timing is key. Food innovation is different from tech innovation, and there's so much in the chain of production that you can't just easily just wipe away. You have labels, you have all the stats that you build packaging, and those are costs that you have to slowly build into. Such great gems that you're sharing. I think that's so powerful as we look into this. So let's talk about the money aspect, which is the biggest kind of challenge that most entrepreneurs, women and people, entrepreneurs of color also face in getting capital. You came to Working Solutions shortly after you started get into your brand, but then you also were able to give you capital to kind of help with that testing phase. But beyond that, you've had to source capital. First, before you got into that, first, how did you find out Working Solutions and the mystery of CDFIs that people still at that time was probably more difficult? How did you find Working Solutions? And then since Working Solutions, what other sources of capital are you leaning into?
Yeah, I think that Renaissance Center, right, in San Francisco, I think that, because because I've received assistance from SBA and SBDC, I think I managed to get one of those back then things are like they promote things mostly on email, and I learned about this financing workshop, right? Then you have to actually show up in person. And so we did this, so I attended this financing workshop, and that's how I got to learn about working solutions, and then applied and got for my first loan. And then the next loan I got actually was from, gosh, what's the bank that merged with Beneficial State Bank?
Amalgamated?
I'm sorry?
Is it Amalgamated?
No, before that, they're based in San Francisco, right? So anyway, back in those days where they were still a little bit more lenient with loans, they gave me a loan as well, right? Then I got a loan. Actually, I used a lot of loans, right? Because sometimes, yes, as women of color, we don't get a lot of VC funding, right? So then we rely on that. And then Whole Foods gave me a couple of loans as well. They have like a Whole Foods local producer loan. And they gave me two loans. One was like $25,000 and the second one was like $75,000. So that was huge. And I think they're doing more loans again. I know that they stopped for quite a few years, right? In between kind of the acquisition with Amazon and all that. And so loans was a big part of it. And of course, friends and family that I could lean into, or things like equipment leases, right? I use equipment leases as well to finance stuff because we had a facility. And terms, actually one thing that's not often talked about, which is absolutely key, negotiating terms with your supplier. Right. So even right now, with a lot of my suppliers, even today, right, as part of evaluating which supplier I go with, I ask them about terms, right? I have packaging supplier. I said, that, hey, would you, to get the best possible price, I'll order 90 days of product of packaging, but I'll have them hold the inventory and only ship me, what I need on like a monthly basis. Right. So all of a sudden, and then you can ask for maybe 45 days or 60-day terms. So all of a sudden you have stretched it, right, over like 5 months instead of, having to pay everything at one go, right? And a lot of packaging suppliers are actually willing to do that. And so I think that really managing, it's not just how much cash you have, but managing that working capital in how you pay your suppliers and having that relationship with suppliers is a very big part of it. Then of course, after that, I think 2017, I was able to fundraise, but honestly, sometimes your ability to fundraise is a factor of a lot of macroeconomics that could be outside of your control, right? And it so happened that my fundraise happened at a time when there were a lot of funds that were just set up, and investing in food was very sexy. And I was in a category that was relatively high growth and trendy with bone broth and everything else, right? But otherwise, we have to kind of still do it. We still have to be as scrappy as we can.
Wow. Thank you for sharing. I mean, as far as I know, Working Solutions, and one of the privilege with working solution is that we kind of have this unique positioning at the first to believe, and so glad that it was part of like your catalyst into getting other sources of capital and moving you forward, and that loans has been a critical part of it. And it's interesting that you mentioned that you're leaning more into loans than into the equity side of fundraising, and just knowing kind of what the statistics look like on it. Would you give us just a little bit of perspective on just a little, we've talked about a little bit of the capital part. You also sit on you're founding member on a membership collective called the Included. How do you, what does the trend look like for diverse food brands right now? And what do you think? How do you drive representations, right now through this platform that you sit up?
Absolutely. Let me maybe first talk a little bit about, what included is, and then kind of our origin story, and then what we're trying to do now. Right. So included is really kind of a collective of BIPOC founders and, C-level positions and entrepreneurs who want to help, amplify, advocate for each other and provide access. Right. So it really came about in 2020 when a group of us, one of the major food trade shows was Cancer Natural Expo West. Right. And then, there's so many things happening, right? With COVID, it's really affected the whole CPG industry and a lot of us founders, right, with supply chain issues and all sorts of different issues. And then you also have that, the Black Lives Matter movement, the anti-Asian hate movement going on. And then we got together virtually, just a group of us, and say, hey, what can we do, right, in light of all of this? How can we help one another? And so that was when the group was kind of born loosely out of a bunch of volunteers. And so we say that how can we help advocate for one another, amplify other's voices, and create more representation. And then since then, some of the things that we've done include, we've managed to negotiate a whole bunch of sponsorship from a couple of organizations. The Expo West, which is run by New Hope, right? They have been sponsoring for about maybe 6, 7 shows now, like 2 shows a year, like 10 booths, fully paid for. And each time the sponsorship is worth a few $100,000, right? And so then there's a whole process, and 10 brands, and it's free to join included, and 10 brands apply for it, and then 10 brands receive the benefit, right, of the access to those trade shows that are super expensive, because it will cost them easily, I don't know, 30, 40,000. So, oh gosh, that's probably $500,000 worth of sponsorship, right? And also, same thing for Fancy Food Show as well, that's put up by the Specialty Food Association. We got sponsorship as well, a whole pavilion, for all those booths. And I think that's big. That's a huge access side of things, right? And certainly we have a community that's been built up. There are about 300 plus members now, where we help each other out, where we are questions, so that, like in the past, how do I find answers to things, right? It's not easy, right? So now they can say, hey, I'm having problems with trade deductions, or I'm dealing with this issue. Does anybody know anything? It's a very, very active group where everyone is all very giving, sharing resources, right? And then LinkedIn, sharing, amplifying each other's voices when celebrating wins for one another, and we are doing like webinars as well, where we have VCs come and talk and do the real talk that is confidential, not recorded, so you can really get kind of the lowdown, like stuff that maybe, people might not say if it's recorded, right? So there's kind of lots of different things that we're doing, and we're continuing to want to do those. But the main thing is that, trying to look at how can we have more representation and equity in kind of the CPG system, right? First, we need to start with supporting the founders, right? But at the same time, you have to work through the whole value chain, right? Buyers, how do we build the network with the buyers? Because as many founders as you can help, if you don't have the relationships and the access to the buyers, they're the ones that's choosing to put our products on shelves. And then also, how do you, have access to the people who write the checks, right? So I think that the industry has evolved where there are so many more BIPOC founders today than there were when I first started 10 years ago, which is awesome. I remember that I'm probably one of like 5 or 6 BIPOC founder on the whole floor of thousands and thousands of booths, right? You can count with like one hand, 2 hand who the other founders are. And now it's huge, which is great, right? So I think that that's definitely progress, but a lot of it is still, how do you go up the food chain, right? Because the check writers are still very white, very male, right? They're not even very female, right? And I think that there's still a lot of work to be done.
Wow, that is amazing. I just love how you are you're taking something that is a personal passion, you're building a brand, but then you're going beyond that to look at the entire community and see where are the gaps and kind of working together. You can tell that you're collaborative in your approach, and that is so needed in this time to find a place and a space. So included is a platform you said is free. So
Free.
yeah.
if you're in the kind of the CPG space in food and beverage, included CPG.com, you can go in there and sign up. And then, you can then be added to the Slack channel, and a lot of things happen on Slack, right? So like a lot of the kind of the benefits, etc. Yeah, so that we're trying to basically do this. And it's all about, it's all just the founding members are just brands that are passionate about it, who might be slightly further along in their journey. And what's exciting is that there's now a community, of a lot of other BIPOC founders who have benefited from it. And what I say to everyone is that if you benefited from it, stick around and help others, right? Because I think it's very sad when someone becomes more successful, then they're too busy, then they don't have time, right? To help others. And so I think that's what we need, which is why when Working Solutions ask me, I always come back.
We're incredibly grateful, and it's you embody that in of just paying it forward. That is it's so key. So again, for the audience, included cpg.com, please go ahead and check it out. We will send some follow-up as well. But as we're kind of talking about just the power of this collective, this is an area I think of empowerment that you also are showing, showing and exemplifying. I noticed that you've kind of served on some boards. You've also served on our East Bay Advisory Board for Working Solutions at some point, the first Asian American board member of the Distinguished Specialty Food Association. Share your journey of getting into the boards, because at some point, at what point were you able to make time to get into it, and what did it take for you to kind of step into that?
Yeah, so what I did was that, especially because I didn't have a network, right? I moved here from outside of the US, right? So I looked for an association to join. The first one I actually joined is the San Francisco Professional Food Society. It's now defunct, very sadly, but it was made of like cookbook authors, bloggers, some people in the CPG food industry, right? And after joining it, I think it's important to be active, because if you want to build a meaningful network, you have to give in order to receive, is how I see it, right? So I was active, just volunteering, even initially as kind of like, sure, I'll help organize an event, right? So I'll put my hand up, right? And so I did it that way. And then I actually was the president as well. I was on the committee there for a little bit. And then, I joined Specialty Food Association initially because I wanted to join the fancy food trade show. Right, so I did that for a number of years, and then when there was a call out in 2017, they said, hey, they're looking for volunteers, and there's a diversity council, right? So I said, yep, I'm going to put my hand up, right? Because I've been now doing the fancy food show for about 4 years or so. I would love to get more active, because just to know more people, right? So and to do something good. So I started that way, and then I got to know more people then, and the president said, hey, why don't you apply and run for a board role? So I ran for a board role in 2018, and got elected on the board and have been on the board since, right? So I'm serving through, I've done 3 terms. I'm actually terming out in a couple of years, in a year's time or so, right? But the key is, I think that you have to make time, right? Right. Suddenly, I don't have a lot of free time for a lot of hobbies. Like, it's very sad. Once I gave up fencing, I didn't do it for like 10 years, right? So you have to, but I feel like, doing things like this is meaningful. It's important, right? And you have to do it sometimes you have to do it with the perspective of not what can I get out of it, but what can I give to it? Because when you put it in that mindset, sometimes you will get lots of things that you didn't expect, but to be way more than, if you had thought about it purely from, what can I get out of it? That's kind of, that's how I see it. I say that, volunteer. That's the main thing.
Such a great philosophy you shared is you got to give to receive, and you shared a gem on being volunteering and looking for community opportunities like the Diversity Council, where you can at least get a seat at the table, and it's so critical for women and business entrepreneurs of color to have a seat at the table, so we can start moving the needle forward, just like you are slowly doing in this space, not just personally for your own business, but for the collective at large. we're getting kind of close to my final question, which I know that some of the audience will definitely have questions to share, to ask you, because you alluded with just so much great insights. So question is, can you speak to the female women woman of color entrepreneur that's a startup founder, that doesn't feel like they have a pathway, or they're doubting themselves in this journey, or maybe they face multiple rejections? What advice would you give them?
You know, definitely it is tough. It is very, very tough, you know, and I'm not going to deny that. And absolutely, like I speak with a different accent. I don't have American accent. I don't watch American sports. So there were so many times when I feel I'm on the outside, right? When you go to see a buyer, you know, I have a broker that I come with on, and then at least they can talk. Oh, you know, did you see these games like football, basketball, baseball, whatever, right? And I can't talk in those language. I've gone to all this like they have all these different investor events during see all these like, you know, young white guys in tight black t-shirts and going like, hey dude, how's it going, man? Yeah, everything's awesome, man. I don't know whether that's good imitation, but you know, and feeling kind of like very on the edge and not belonging. So absolutely there will be that, right? But what I would say is that I'm grateful that it's changing. Find your tribe, right? Like included, I know there are a lot of included members. They are so happy. At least when we go to events, you have people that look more like you, right? So you have that tribe, which is important. I think the other one though is also, I would say, couple more advice, right? Which is two advice. Actually, I'm stealing somebody else's advice, which is one is from Madeline, founder of Nutpots. I just listened to her how I built this yesterday, right? And the advice from her husband is that it's a numbers game. You know, the more no's you get, the closer you are to a yes. It's very, very painful. You can try to look at it philosophically, right? But it's probably true, right? Or another female founder, she's like, I was like, oh, I love that. She's like, oh, the first no is a maybe. The second no is a yes, but later. Those are all very good tips. And then finally, I think that have a spirit of generosity for both yourself and for others. You know, I think that be generous with yourself, right? It's easy to be critical with ourselves and to have a lot of doubt. I think that you know, I think that we need to focus on what we have accomplished as well, because more often than not, I think about all the things that I could have done better, right? And then, you know, someone would say that, hey, you know, a guy wakes up and they think about how great they are, right? I don't know, right? But certainly, I think be generous with ourselves and then be generous with others. You know, I've had certainly over the years that could be mansplaining, you know, that could be, you know, microaggressions, right? Sometimes, what I try to do though is that I try to be generous with them as well. Like I could call them up, especially with mansplaining. Like I have basically said to someone before who wanted to be a consultant and say, hey, you know, you might not know that you're doing this, but I really feel like you're talking down to me. Like, and then they really apologized, right? And after that, I move on, right? And sometimes I think that some people there might be microaggressions, but then I think about where they're coming from. Like they might not even know that they're doing it, and so then I try not to be offended. I might call it out nicely, right? And I feel like by doing it that way, it just helps us move on, right? And so I think that that's kind of the tip that I would give on my end.
So helpful. Find ways professionally to call them out when they cross the line. And it's a numbers game. It is a numbers game. The more it's painful, unfortunately, but that could be also another way to kind of, you know, take this on and take on the spirit of generosity, and be generous to yourself. You know, starts with you. I want to encourage us to start dropping your questions if you're still kind of thinking and lingering about questions. This is the time for the question time to kind of kick in. This has been such a insightful conversation, and I'm sure there's so much more she can share with us in the short time that we have left. So this is the time for Q&A. So I do have some questions that I'm going to read out and encourage others to also jump in. So can you speak more about the minimal viable product, the MVP, learning and what we learned, that a small business may not be able to affect a larger change, like in.
Yeah, yeah. You know, I think a lot of it, what I would say is that, right, minimum viable product learning. So things that you could do certainly in the food space when it comes to that is that you could make some little samples in your kitchen, fine, and test it with your friends and keep testing with your friends and doing actual research and even taking samples, you know, to a buy right buyer, a Berkeley Board buyer, and actually just ask them, hey, I would just love to get your feedback, right? So that is good. But when you try to do a minimum viable product with a co-packer, right? That's not a good idea because the MOQ, the minimum order quantity, is too high. It'd be too expensive, right? So minimum viable product can work as long as cheap and fast, and you just try and get a bit of feedback, but not if you're trying to launch it in a lot of stores. So that's, I would say, kind of how I would approach it. And then in terms of a small business, yes, not being able to affect a sea change. I'll just tell you more about my mistake, right? So when we first launched, let's say fresh Asian rice noodles, or you know, or fresh soup cups, right? It's like the soup cups are extremely innovative. It's kind of a refrigerated soup that is in a cup, but where do you put it? You know, do you put it in the deli set? Do you put it in the dairy set with the tofu? Do you put it, you know, there's so many different places you can place it, right? I was innovating for the consumer because I was the consumer. I didn't come from CPG. I was not innovating for the retailer. And you should always innovate for the retailer because if you're the only product in that category, the buyer will say, hey, your product sounds interesting. I'm not sure it belongs to my category, right? And so you need to have 4, 5, 6 brands that is already exist there. Then it's, oh yeah, sure, this slots in really nicely in there, right? Uh, and that's the thing, right? Which is sometimes when I try to do things that is so brand new, where it's nowhere to be found in the store, who do you present to, right? So I think those are the things you have to think about, or you know, or even if you are creating something that is so special, even if you're going to do it on DTC, how do you educate consumer, right? Because if you have a lot of money, sure, you just maybe like Beyond Meats, right, or whatever, you've raised $20 million, you can go and do a lot of consumer education, right? But even then, you know, where are you going to sell in the store? I think that's what I mean, and that those are things that I didn't think about when I first launched my products because I was so consumer centric versus retailer centric.
So helpful insight. Thank you for sharing that. Question around co-packing. Are you currently using a co-packing, and if so, were they able to match your flavors?
Yes and no, right? I would say that candidly, we shut down our facility and then we moved to a co-packer, and it's such a painful process trying to get that to work. And I probably should have been much tighter managing it. And then I have some co-packers that I build out great relationships with that do not have any quality issues at all, right? So what I would say is really, really spend a lot of time. I mean, if you can do it yourself in the test kitchen or in the rental kitchen or in the small run, do it as much as you can so you understand the whole process because it's a lot cheaper that way before you then use a co-packer. Unless, of course, if you're doing certain products that require aseptic packaging, that require very expensive equipment and process, you will not be able to do that, right? You might have to start straight away with a co-packer. Or like canning beverages, right? You're not going to do your own little canning. And so I think those would be kind of it depends, right? But yeah, you know, have I had challenges? Yes. Not all of them, but some of them. And so being on top of it, and this is where hiring a consultant, you know, if you have no background at all in working with co-packers, that's when maybe hiring an expert might be worth it so that you don't actually waste time and money learning it the hard way, right? Yeah. Packaging suppliers, you know, oh gosh, I think the ones that I use are on the East Coast right now. I did use someone that's actually local on the West Coast before, actually based in Hayward. I can't remember the name off the top of my head, you know, email me later. I think a lot of it, again, it depends on what packaging you're looking for, is very specific. Is it a master case packaging? Does your product come in a special, is it a standard pouch packaging that you're looking for? Is it a, injection mold required for a cup, right? Is it a paper box, right? So different packaging suppliers do different things. So, without knowing what kind of packaging you're looking for, probably whatever names I give you will not be relevant.
Mhm. This is great. I guess maybe joining the included platform will be helpful because then she
Yeah.
can, maybe the person can get some additional industry insights. Yeah.
Absolutely. And very specific referrals.
Specific. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's helpful. I got a question around distributors.
Yeah.
What are some pitfalls to watch out for in terms of negotiating with distributors?
Oh gosh. So when I first launched my products, I literally had a little refrigerated van that I was driving around, or then I had somebody, I hired an hourly person to drive around like 10, 15 stores, right? I literally started at that level. So what I would say is be very careful. I mean, distributor is tough, right? Because if you have zero committed retailers, they're not going to pick you up, right? And so it's kind of chicken and egg. So literally, I was taking samples to all the grocery stores, the independents, people like the Bi-Rites, the Berkeley Bowls, the Rainbow Groceries, right? That would be able to make decision quickly on the not on the spot, but it's not tied to like a big chain that reviews that resets once a year, right? You almost need to start that way and build some volume and hustle before you can work with a distributor. And a lot of times, the bigger distributors, there's no way of getting in them unless you have like a Whole Foods or a Safeway or something saying, "Yep, I want your products," and they ask the distributor like UNFI to bring it on, right? It would take many, many, many hours to talk about distributors and all the challenges working with them. I would recommend joining Included. Again, the Slack, there's a lot of discussion there. It's definitely one that could bankrupt a business, and many businesses have been bankrupted from not managing distributors well.
Very, very helpful insight that you share. Given that you are, kind of the with changes that you see in the industry, like we're currently at the verge of a lot of shift in just supply chain and AI. What are some things that you think is coming up for the industry that people in the CPG and should be aware of and should start looking and paying attention to?
Yeah. I think AI and CPG is interesting. I think it's still a little bit nascent, right? I think there's definitely a lot of software that's being developed with AI there, right? So I actually will talk a little bit about some trends that already happened and how it's impacting us. I think that food is becoming very, very CPG is becoming very, very expensive and challenging, right? You have on one hand a lot of the big chains, even Whole Foods, right? A lot of the chains are focusing on private label, right? So you have if they're doing private label, they're not bringing your brand in, especially if your product is more mainstream and not very niche. Right? If you're doing an ethnic product, it's a little bit better because it's not as mainstream yet. It's a bit more niche, right? But they're also making it very expensive to get into stores, the big ones. So you really want to work with the small independents because they're going to be a lot friendlier. At the same time, you have capital, like capital is really, really tight in the last few years. That can actually be to our advantage, and I'll talk about that in a second, right? And DTC is becoming customer acquisition costs have really skyrocketed in the last 2 years, right? Last few years as well. So that's almost becoming not viable if you have a food product because the margins aren't high, your average order value AOV is not the highest. Right. So the question is, what's the route to market, right? What's your channel strategy? I would say that in some ways it's good and bad, right? Because capital is drying up. It means that all these businesses that used to be very well funded could just throw money to grow the top line, right? And then us, kind of BIPOC founders that are not very well funded find that we cannot catch up, right? But because capital is drying up, everyone has to focus on profitability, which means they're not chasing top line, which means that gives us more time and we don't feel so pressured, right? So that allows us to really focus on what I think we can do really well in, which is how do you really manage cost, right? So I think the key to managing cost is going to help us win. So it is a very challenging environment from a capital perspective, but it might give us more time to prove our business, which is not a bad thing.
Great, great. I think we are pretty much at the end of the questions that I see here. And I just want to appreciate you incredibly for the time and the insights and gems you shared, and you definitely embodied the generosity of just like sharing your time and your resources with the audience today. I am going to pass it to Laura Hoover, our Chief Development Officer, to share closing remarks.
Thank you so much, Titi and Nona. A huge thank you to you for your time today. On behalf of the Working Solutions team, we are so grateful to you. Thank you for walking your talk. You give to receive. I think that there were just some really wonderful nuggets and takeaways there. Being generous with yourself, so important to hear that. That landed particularly well for me today. So thank you. I know you touched a lot of people on this call, and your insights, your business acumen has just been a huge gift, sharing that with all of us today. So again, just want to thank you for your time. We say that Working Solutions is the first to believe in small businesses, and Nona, you are the first to remember us. You're always there for us whenever we call on you, and we really appreciate that. Thank you so much, and much success to you as you continue to grow your business.
Thank you.
Thank you again, Nona Lim. And again, thank you to the audience for joining us today. You are on the chat, I believe I dropped it, but we can also send back to you. It's called includedcpg.com. Please do join that. It's a resource that's going to be incredibly helpful as you navigate this. Information is key and the network is powerful. So thank you, Nona, for your generosity again. Until next time, again, thanks, and I appreciate you all. This concludes our presentation today. Have a good day.
Take care.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone.